I am in control of one thing, and that is me. I choose how to respond, how to behave, and how I'm going to navigate the world.
Mm-hmm.
Because that's it. That's all you've got. Everything else is out of your control. And there's a
if I'm making
responsibility in
choices,
that, but there's a releasing in that too. Welcome to the Relational Parenting Podcast. I'm Jennifer Hayes, a parent coach and 20-year childcare veteran. Each week, I sit down with my own father, Rick Hayes, and discuss the complicated issues that parents face today, as well as some of the oldest questions in the book. From the latest research and the framework of my relational parenting method, we offer thought-provoking solutions to your deepest parenting struggles. Added bonuses include intergenerational wounding discussions and guest childcare experts. We will also start taking your parenting questions in episode 5, so be sure to comment with your biggest questions or email me directly at jenny@jennyb.co. Let's get started. Welcome back, everybody, to the Relational Parenting Podcast. We are here this week, just me and Dad, and we are talking about nature versus nurture, which is a thousands of years old question, but mixed in with nature and nurture are the concepts or philosophies of determinism and free will, as well as we'll get into all the other stuff. But nature versus nurture is what today is about, and we're going to kind of dissect some of the newer science around, how nature shows up and how nurture affects it. We're going to talk about really how these things intertwine, right? How it's not one or the other, it's both and that we do have the power to influence our nature or our biology, our genetics, etc., and how we can do that through parenting. So,
otherwise we're just victims of our past, and there's no hope. And it's very nihilistic to just say, "Oh,
right?
Well, you can't. Personal opinion. You can't go with all. It's not all nature. You got to be able to influence it. Got to strive. You got to strive. Got to struggle. Wisdom plays a part."
Yeah. Yeah, and it very much plays into the concept of generational trauma that we have talked about a few times on here. The way that generational trauma is broken, the way that we look at the patterns that exist in our family lines and choose to act differently, choose to behave differently, choose to treat our children differently, choose to treat ourselves differently, etc. That's nurture. That's nurture over nature. Just because you are born with a certain characteristic doesn't mean you have to act out that characteristic. And you get to explore and look at yourself and look at all the different pieces of yourself as you become more and more aware. When you become an adult and you get into your adulthood and you're watching yourself behave or respond to the people around you, or you're watching like the people you surround yourself with. And maybe one day you look around and you're like, why am I letting these people into my life? Or why am I letting myself be treated this way? Or why am I treating people that way? You get to explore those things and you get to make different choices. And so let's back up a little bit and just talk about what nature is and what nurture is to kick us off here.
Okay.
What is your understanding of nature and nurture?
Nature versus nurture. So in my mind, nature is the you mentioned determinism versus self-will. Nature is the component of us that we're born with, the genetics, not the environment, not, nurture is your environment and the people in your environment, everything that affects you. Nature is basically biology. My training was in biology and philosophy, so that's made for me. Nature is biology, nurtures everything else. The environment you put yourself in. What you were talking about before, all those things we do to change once we're born. We're dealt a hand of cards. There's all kinds of. I was kind of surprised that the term nature versus nurture is still so popular. That's a good sign. That's been around forever. So to me that's a good sign that is a pretty good generalization for the issues, that we're still referring. I'm sure there's much more technical language, and the academics are defining it, scientifically defining it into smaller and smaller things, trying to decompose it and solve problems. But the fact that we're still talking about nature versus nurture means that's a pretty good approximation. To change it, we have to think. What you were talking about before is we can make choices, we can decide, those are all thought processes, and thought kind of decomposes when we're upset. We have to get ourselves in a place where we can think straight and make good decisions and good choices. And so that's the regulation theme you've got. If you're in a chaotic environment, not everybody's in the same environment. If you're in whatever your environment is, you got to be able to sit down, settle yourself, so you can think, so you can make good choices, and that's the game. That's the game of life. Acquiring wisdom versus just reacting helplessly to the environment you're in. Instead of don't just be a leaf on a raging river. Learn to paddle.
Yeah. It's so. That concept of choice versus throwing our hands up at the circumstances that we are in, or even at the internal circumstances that we are in. I've done that 1,000 times in my life, where I just, I enter a place of depression or anxiety, and I'm not talking about major depressive disorder where you need other people to
Not
help
clinical,
you out of it,
yeah.
clinical. But because I've also experienced that. You and I have been through, went through a whole journey with that in my younger adulthood, and that's very real. That's mental health. That's a very real condition. But in when life is fine and things are fine, but you enter these pockets where you're just really down, or feeling really helpless, feeling really overwhelmed.
Overwhelmedness, or
excuse me, overwhelmed. There's like a hair in my tooth.
Overwhelmedness. Flossing.
And that's always when it comes for me, is overwhelm. I get overwhelmed and I feel like I'm trapped, or I feel like I don't know which way to go. And that's kind of those moments where I have thrown my hands up and been like, this isn't, I feel like this isn't fair, or I've had to navigate this 4,000 times. Why am I having to navigate this again?
The injustice thing, why am I not getting this?
And it is like
that injustice trigger we've all got.
The feeling that comes with that is valid. And we don't have to live there. And learning to feel that feeling, be frustrated, be pissed off. I don't like the hand I was dealt. This is bullshit. But not set. There's a quote that's like, it's good to feel your feelings. It's good to tune in, feel your feelings, have emotions, and you don't have to set up camp in that emotion. Your emotion is,
that's right. You don't have to live there. Yeah.
Energy in motion. You have let it pass through you. Let it come.
Yeah.
Feel it. Let it go, and step forward and make a choice. Right? It's just like, baby steps, one step forward, one step at a time. All those metaphors is all about choice. And not getting swept up in the raging river and just floating along, being like, well, there's nothing I can do. Well, you could learn to paddle. It'll be harder, but your life will be better, and you'll determine where your life goes, instead of letting life determine where your life goes. Yeah.
Yeah. That's what we have to teach our kids, is that it is better to paddle, even a little bit. Even if you don't know exactly where you're going to go, overwhelmedness is looking at too many things at once. That's when you got to contract and say, well, okay, the other concept is I always have is what's in my control and what's not. If it's not under my control, well, okay, so be it.
Mm-hmm.
What is under my control, and where you go, okay, you focus in on something you can do now. What's the most important thing we do now? And then sometimes you just have to take it one step at a time, one foot in front of the other for a while until some other things that are not in your control resolve themselves. It's and that all takes thought. That's always where I come back to, is if you're emotionally overwhelmed, that will trump thinking, and then that's when you get in trouble. Is no, I gotta come up. We have to teach our kids. This is a parenting podcast. We need to learn those things so we can pass them on to our kids on how to deal with overwhelmedness and that sort of thing. That's wisdom. That's where short little pithy sayings come in handy, because you keep them in mind and they pop into your mind when you need them. Yeah.
Well, and also as human beings, we all, not all, but most people that I know, including myself, love metaphors because it helps frame abstract thought and concepts into a black and white box that we can understand and digest.
Exactly.
And like you were saying about, well, I lost it.
Uh-oh. Train wreck.
So you said something about getting lost in emotions instead of thought, because presence
can be overwhelming.
Awareness, mindfulness takes clear thought, and I agree with that partially. But I also think when I get to a place of overwhelmedness, my goal is to stop trying so hard and release, like you said, looking at what you can control and what you can't, and taking what you can control and take a step towards that, or take a step into that, and let go of everything else, because the emotion is all of that overwhelm of everything you can't control. And
negative self-talk, and
and the thought, I get lost in trying to outthink things, because I think that's also a pitfall of a lot of people, is that we try to rationalize or logical mind our way through something, and it's like white knuckling it, and that can keep you stuck too. There's something to be said for when you are heavily emotional, just allowing yourself to be with those emotions, whether it's an hour or a day. Like, that might be the universe or your intuition signaling you to slow down, stop trying so hard, stop pushing so hard, absolutely, and just sit and breathe and get back into your body and back into the moment of presence and awareness, and let it all go for a minute. The world is not going to crumble down around you. And just breathe, let go of thought, let go of emotion, and sit.
That kind of predicates, you're right, that kind of predicates. I've been caught up in should I, shouldn't I, pros and cons, trying
pros
to
and cons
weigh.
lists are just the worst. Don't do those. Those are stupid.
I know. Well,
I hate them. They're dumb.
20s and 30s, but this is the current version.
I know.
We work through things. And yeah, you can absolutely tie yourself up trying to make a rational decision. Not every decision is rational.
Yeah.
And sometimes you just
Gotta
have
follow
to
your gut.
stew. There's a technique I ran into the other day about involved in just sitting in something training. It
Mm-hmm.
had to do with people learning to quit smoking who had tried and couldn't, and then they did a study, and they found what helped was uh, just teaching people to sit in the discomfort. They'd give them a
Yep.
pack of cigarettes, and okay, now just sit there. Okay, now take the cellophane off, and now let's just sit there a little while. Okay, take one out, smell it. Okay, now let's just sit here a couple, and sit there. It's the urgency thing we've talked about
Yeah.
before. You got to learn to deal with I have to do something about this. No, just relax. Quit trying so hard. Be okay.
Yeah.
It's not going to kill you. Learn that you have to learn. It's like you have to learn. Your body has to learn that it's not the urgency. It's not going to kill you. And okay, and then it gets easier. You get over the first one, and then the next one's a little easier. Yeah, very much somatic, emotional.
So nature, like you said, is the genetics that we are born with. We have no control over that. No one has control over that. And nurture is our environment, our parents, our siblings, the way that our parents talk to us and treat us or hug us, or what school we go to.
All the people around us.
Every word that anyone says to us is nurturing us in one direction or another, and shaping our thoughts and shaping the way that we see the world, shaping the way that we relate to the world, shaping the way we relate to ourselves, shaping the way that we relate to our friends and the way that we find romantic partners, and then eventually the way that we parent our own children. And some people even refer to that as our conditioning. And there's social conditioning, there's familial conditioning, there's our own internal, conditioning that comes from just the way that we're built, our personalities.
That would partly that would be a good application of nature and nurture. Stuff we learn versus stuff we do to ourselves.
Yeah. And so when we say nature versus nurture, like we said at the beginning of the episode, I'm trying to figure out how I want to say this, is that it's both. They're interwoven. They aren't this and that thing. They both come together and weave. You called it a soup, I think, before. I always call it like universal alchemy or a spider web. And you called it
melange.
Soup. It's all it's all intertwining and mingling and moving and connecting in all the different ways. And it's always changing, and it's always changing in one direction or another, or 8 other directions. And the goal with nurture is you can't choose your parents, right? But once you become an adult, you get to start, and some people, a lot of people start kind of thinking about these things even as early. I remember thinking about higher power when I was 8 years old. But I think a lot of these conceptual things we really start to dig into in our teenage years. We really start to figure out, what do I believe? We start to figure out like our separateness from our parents. We start to cultivate independence and do more things on our own, and have more freedom and less oversight, and making choices completely autonomously. And so I think it really starts in teenage years, and figuring out, who do I want to be? What choices am I going to make? And of course there's peer pressure, and there's all kinds of influences still happening. But then you step into adulthood, and eventually a lot of us step into parenthood, and we have to look at, who am I choosing to be? Not just where did I come from? Who did me wrong? My parents did this. My friends did that. My teacher told me that I was this. Like, you don't have to take on any of that. You don't have to. It's hard to do as a child. So when you become an adult, you have to undo some of that because you're extremely influential when you're a child and you're a sponge and you're learning. And these people are responsible for helping you figure out the world. But once you're an adult, you can't blame anybody else anymore. You have to step into nurturing self and who do I want to be? And I actually have free will. I can literally do anything that I want. I can literally make any choice that I want to make. I can write any path that I want to write. And I don't have to do anything a certain way. And once you recognize that power inside of yourself, which could take a long time depending on how much power was taken away from you as a child. If you were an empowered child, if you were taught to make choices, mistakes were accepted, failure was accepted, and then you were then empowered to learn, problem solve, make different choices by the people who were taking care of you, then you might have already cultivated a lot of this in your adulthood. But if you were in a childhood where you were extremely sheltered, you were always told what was wrong and right instead of encouraged to think about things or problem solve, you might step into adulthood with a very narrow view of what you can do with your life because your power was constantly taken away from you when you were young.
Yep.
And so wherever you're coming from as you step into adulthood and whatever year of your life you come across this concept of I'm actually completely in control of all of the choices that I make. I can't control the environment. Things are going to happen to me that I have no control over, but my choice is how I react and respond to those things, how I overcome those things, how I navigate, make my way through those things, and everything else is my choice. I get to choose, to build a career in whatever field, area, way that I want to. I get to choose to follow my joy. I get to choose to follow a path that someone else laid out for me. I get to choose to have children. I get to choose my partner. I get to choose and become very mindful of my own self and what I do to affect my environment too, because that's also part of it, right? What am I doing to the outside world? And as you do that, and if you are someone who has stepped into parenthood or wants to step into parenthood, it's a critical piece of the puzzle. If you are someone who wants to raise your children differently than you were raised, it's not going to happen by accident. It's going to happen by intention and presence, because what's going to happen by accident is getting frustrated, getting triggered, yelling, doing things you don't mean to do, saying things you don't mean to say. And we're all human, and those things are going to happen.
Reacting rather than responding, and overwhelmed, doing it in the midst of overwhelmedness. And
But if you want to, all of this long little soapbox to say that nurture can influence nature. Not just in the moment, not just in how you're choosing to show up in the world, regardless of your DNA, but in literally changing the DNA that is passed down to the next generations. Nurture, they've shown in scientific studies that regardless of the DNA you start with, you have the genes that you have. You can't change them, but you can turn them on and off. So you can trigger a gene to activate. You can also trigger
anyway.
Their expression in the physical world. So the DNA lives in your cells, and based on the food that you eat, the way that you're treated, the way that you treat yourself, the thoughts that you think, etc., you can turn these genes on and off. It's not as simple as that, but it's through a bulk of activity and expression that you either express those parts of your DNA or you don't. So if you are predisposed to depression, there are ways to live your life and activities that you can do that eventually can overcome or sedate that part of your DNA.
Yeah, there's ways you learn, ways of being you can learn.
Yeah.
Called
So
growth.
all of that is, you can do that for yourself as an adult and stepping into your power and acknowledging and claiming that choice that you have, and seeking to learn and seeking to grow. You can also do that with the shifts you make in yourself, and the partner you choose to create children with will then determine the DNA of the next generation. And you can't necessarily control which DNA they get, but you can control the quality of your contribution to it. And you can control who you choose as your partner, which contributes to the DNA quality in your children. And then through the way that you parent, consciously, mindfully, with awareness and seeking growth and knowledge and best methods, you can help shift whatever parts of DNA your child gets that are less desirable or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
You can help them navigate that part of themselves. You can help them navigate and give them tools to use and teach them how to make choice and not fall into a pit of overwhelm or frustration or injustice and unfairness. That this is just the way that I am. You can teach them, no, you are a powerful being. You have choice at every moment of your life.
Be
You have a
different.
choice.
Yeah.
And then that child grows up with those strengths and abilities, and then they have children. They choose a good partner. They have they have children with DNA, and they continue that cycle. And through nurture, we can actually change our DNA. That's generational trauma. That's
And
breaking the
changing the
cycle.
world.
Yeah. So every generation,
making the world a better place. I call that making the world a better place. Being a little bit better, making your kids a little bit better. That's how we change the world in our own little way.
So if you can claim your power now where you stand as a parent or as someone who wishes to be a parent someday, if you can stand in your power, claim your choice, claim your free will now, like that will change the world.
Yeah.
That will change the next generation and the generation after that and after that and after that. Like what you do today will influence the next thousands of years of humanity. And
it's an awesome responsibility if you stop and think
and it's
about it.
like, it's that in and of itself can be overwhelming. I know that I've woken up certain days and I'm like, I don't care about 1,000 years from now. Like, why does today suck for me?
That's right. I'm hungry now. I'll be dead. I'll be dead before I get there if I don't figure out how to get a job and eat. Yeah.
Yeah. It's hard. It's like so empowering, and also so, it's, with great power comes great responsibility is just what popped into my head. And it's like, it's so accurate. You take these things onto your shoulders. You take on this responsibility to really just be your best self. It doesn't have to be like, I'm now responsible for my grandchildren's grandchildren. It doesn't need to be this daunting task. It's my job is to be the absolute best version of myself right now, today, in any given moment.
That's the challenge. That's the problem with social media. We're comparing ourselves to the best little snippets other people can put together instead of, I tried to teach you guys, you and your brothers, the only thing you should be comparing yourself to is yourself yesterday, right?
Yeah.
Did I do this a little better? I slipped up. I'm a little better than I was a month ago. And then that's all you can do, because the rest of it's all smoke and mirrors, looking at other people's lives in public is just a depressing exercise that's bound to depress you. And the effect it has on kids, all these things we're talking about, as adults, it's one thing, and we have a certain experience to judge it and decide whether to take it in, and a certain amount of power, building that independence. Oh, hey, I can make my own decisions. That's something that grows. The things you're doing to kids when they're completely powerless, it makes me mad sometimes. You see somebody doing something really unhealthy.
Yeah.
Um, to little kids, you really want to walk over and intervene and protect, at least as a guy. And the better you can do, the smaller your kids are, the more you can grow as a parent when you interact with kids and with other human beings. In some respects, we're all kids forever. We all have those things left over from childhood, those things we react to, triggers.
Yeah.
Some people call them be aware of that, no matter what age you are, no matter what age they are. Just being more aware and being more mature. For me, that's what you also talked about. That point where you make where you realize that, hey, I don't have to just do. I'm not just a product of my genetics or my upbringing. I can take the bull by the horns.
Yeah.
That's a big right. That's one of the things, I guess, that makes an adult, I think, is when you
Mm-hmm.
start taking responsibility for yourself and your actions. And it's like, well, okay, my past sucked, but
Mm-hmm.
I'm aware that there's a better way to do things, and so then you join the battle of getting better, being better, making the world a better place. I guess that's not a goal everybody necessarily shares, but
But even if it's just
yeah,
about you, even if it's just about yourself, you do not have to live the way that your parents lived or the way that your grandparents lived. Like if
yeah,
you have a calling in your heart to do something else, to maybe, so for me, a very, very personal example is that I grew up in a household where both of my parents held 9 to 5 jobs. And I have been dabbling in or fully immersed in some version of entrepreneurship for almost a decade now, and struggling back and forth between having a 9 to 5 and entrepreneurship and figuring out
it's
where I
supposed to look
fall
like. Yeah.
in that, because I did not grow up around it. And aunts and uncles and everyone that I knew in my immediate circle had 9 to 5s. And so what I knew is that you grow up and you save money and you live under your means and you work and you get raises every year, um and you put into a retirement plan, and then you retire and live off what the government chooses to hand you until you
Or
die,
your own savings. Yeah.
or savings. But I was never taught, um I would never witnessed entrepreneurship or starting a business or business tactics. I never really knew anything about the stock market or investing or making money work for you instead of just sitting in oh my goodness, in a savings account. Um, there was a style of life that I grew up in, and
Mm-hmm.
there was a lot of mind work, and it's still like I'm not perfect at. I still have to be like catch myself looking backwards to be like decide if I'm capable of doing something different. And then I'm like, that's not me. That was them. That was their choices. That was
Mm-hmm.
my
Mm-hmm.
childhood. I get to decide how I'm going to live my life and do things
Yeah.
differently. Um, and but it's so easy to look at the way things have always been done to your knowledge and just follow that path, because there's nothing wrong with that path. It's also like there's nothing like for that, there's abuse and there's terrible things that can happen to people when they're growing up, and it doesn't have to be huge and traumatic for you to be like, I don't want to live like that. I want to live like this. And it's
Mm-hmm.
still so
Mm-hmm.
hard to break that mold. And
Mm-hmm.
if you were abused as a child, it's so hard to break that mold and not feel justified in smacking your kid because you got smacked. So, of course, like that's how
Yeah.
you make people listen to you.
How do you
Um,
deal with this? Yeah.
but it can be as simple as I'm not going to handle my finances the way my parents did. I want to handle my finances this way, and breaking that mold can be you're literally rewiring connected neurons in your brain. Like my brain is wired to do my finances that way. And it was for almost 30 years until I chose to read a book and listen to this podcast and learn and educate and figure out a different way. And I'm
Do it
still
different.
working with that rewiring of how to manage finances, et cetera. And so that's just an example of, it doesn't need to
It's work.
be some horrendous thing that your parents did to you that you don't want to do anymore. It's not
Right.
always that black and white. There's little things that we reflect on and identify with because we are part of our parents. We do have parts of our personality that reflect the things that we see our parents doing. And we're like, we catch ourselves doing it too. Or, our siblings tell us, you act like mom or you act like dad or whatever. And it's hard to look at that part of yourself and not be like, well, everything's just predetermined. I'm just going to end up doing what they did because that's who I am. And that's where determinism comes into play. So determinism is kind of like nature, but it's a slightly more theological, philosophical, in that your life path is predetermined. And whether you believe in Christianity or Hinduism or just basic spirituality and universal influence, whatever your spirituality belief system is, most of them have a underlying deterministic aspect to them where you are born and your spirit has a purpose to serve in the
Karma.
world. And you are gifted with personality traits or DNA that is programmed towards that soul purpose. And there are a lot of ways to fulfill a soul purpose. And we are also gifted with free will. So I don't think someone correct me, I don't know of any religion that free will is not part of the soup. I think every religion believes in humanity being born with free will to make choices. And so you take determinism, a predetermined purpose for your life, and you take free will and you mush them together. And it's like, it's very similar to nature versus nurture. It's, here are your gifts and perhaps a fulfilling purpose that you were sent here for. And I still have free will. I can fight that purpose. I can ignore that purpose. I can go around, over, and under that purpose. Or maybe it's simply that your life path is going to wind you through all the things you need to learn to get to that purpose. But it's still a choice. And if you, for whatever reason, are like, that's not where I'm going, you can choose something else. But I think that there's a lot of determinism in Christianity is the only religion I will claim to have studied enough to understand the level of determinism that it holds versus other religions or belief systems. And there's a lot of like God created you in his image and that he sent you here for a purpose, and God has already determined your life path. And so you needn't worry. And I think that gets manipulated by our brains, by leaders who misinterpret that into
Anybody who
being
wants to manipulate
a
you.
helplessness of, I'm just going to let life happen to me, versus the other half of that, which is that you are the co-creator. There's a creator and you are the co-creator of your life, and you were sent here with DNA, with a lot of things that you have no control over, and you were given this control over your self-expression and over your choices and how you act and behave and step forward into things or step back from things. And like, so there's two pieces here. It's not just determinism is you're born and your life is going to go a certain way. You have no control over it, versus free will. And it's like, once again, it's not either or, it's both. There's both sides of the same coin that have to work together to create what it is your life is going to be.
Yeah, that's a lesson.
The other little nugget that we brought up that I actually want you to that I want you to speak to, is something you said right before we started recording, is that you just learned recently how psychology actually, the effect of trauma is not just psychological, but that trauma actually lives in the body, in our physiology.
Yeah. So I've had experiences in my life that, kind of back to what we were talking about, that I thought I could think my way through, that I'm realizing in recent months and years that didn't work very well. They had a physiological effect on me, my amygdala or whatever, my intuitive reactions to things have changed, and I'm pretty good at thinking my way through things and rationalizing and cognitive behavioral therapy kind of stuff,
Yeah.
But that only goes so far with long-term sustained experiences of the past that, I guess there's a couple of ways. It's not for me, it's a thing you learn to live with. The example I've used in other conversations is, guys go to war, people go to war, and they come back and they've lost a leg or all their or legs and arms. They come back physically changed. And that doesn't mean, it's just a reality you need to face and go forward somehow. You got to learn how to negotiate life. It's different than it might have been otherwise, but here we are, back to the environment, the soup. What's the pool we're in? What's the pond we're in? What kind of fish are we? And you deal with it going forward. And that's where being on a path of growth and having a spiritual side or a spiritual belief to draw some strength from, some wisdom from, and to temper your reactions. If it's become part of your lizard brain, then learning to take a breath before you respond to things so that you can respond with thought instead of just reacting, taking time, sitting in the discomfort like we were talking about earlier, learning to tolerate that. It's fine. It changes your personality a little bit, but it's certainly something you can work with. But it was I'd not really been aware of it.
What are some of so you were saying that you previously thought you could think your way through anything. What are some of the things that you're learning about that are other tools for working through something versus just trying to logic or think your way through it in your responses?
So sometimes when you're thinking your way through, we have emotional sides. Not all decisions are rational, right? Some decisions are just emotional. I'm going to do what feels good or what feels right, which is kind of a gestalt of,
or intuitive. Sometimes we just need to feel our gut.
Intuitive is another way to say it.
Yeah.
I'm a very intuitive thinker.
Well, I think they're different. So in intuition, emotions, intuition, and rational thought are three very different things. Reacting from an emotional place.
Okay. What's intuitive?
Responding Intuitive to me is my gut is telling me to go a certain direction. And your gut, if it's your gut is never going to tell you to react, scream, do these like big harmful things. Your gut is going to lead you towards your highest self, your best response. And sometimes we can do that through rational thought as well. Sometimes if we need to pull in the logical to soothe the emotional, like those
goal,
things can come together.
Yeah.
But those are all separate things. Like an emotional reaction, a completely strictly emotional reaction with no forethought, no mindfulness, and no tuning in, like that deep breath that you're talking about, that's I'm going to you're grounding yourself so you can hear your intuition, or so that you can think clearly. Those are three very separate things to me.
Okay, so emotional is kind of a deterministic in that model. Emotional is kind of deterministic.
It's a knee-jerk
without
reaction.
Thought, knee-jerk. Whereas intuitive is, well, kind of the space between
presence.
The emotional, here's what I want to punch you in the face, my values that doesn't fit with my philosophy,
And
kind of thing.
the intuitive is in between. Yeah. Of what is my boundary here, because my emotions are valid, but my actions are going to reflect my values to express that emotion.
Well, so then I've got kind of a loop going between the emotions, which I've learned, to your question, sometimes, and maybe this is why guys like to have man caves, or they're like dogs. They go off and curl up in a field by themselves until they've healed enough where they feel like coming back.
We all do that, by the way. Women do that too. We all need that. We all need to go into the metaphorical cave and center and digest and integrate and then come back. Yeah.
And so I've learned to give it time. I will have then, in that model, emotional reactions, and it's like, right now is not the time. You don't want me to react to this right now.
Yeah.
I'm going to go read a book or something, and then you do the distraction, or just what it is letting your nervous system subside, right? So now I can think. Now I can trust my thoughts.
Which takes anywhere from 20 minutes minimum to regulate your nervous system to 72 hours.
I was going to say 3 or 4 days. Yeah.
I'm just saying, like, scientifically, or whatever the studies have shown,
that fits.
The understanding of the regulation of the nervous system takes a minimum of 20 minutes.
Yeah.
And up to and beyond 72 hours, depending on the height of the emotion. Yeah.
That's right. And so, depending upon the stimulus, and then I think there's time once if it takes 72 hours for your limbic or autonomic system, of your nervous system to settle, then there's a period of, okay, now I can think about what I want to do before you really want to go back and respond. How do I want to respond to this? And so and it gets back to the control. You've used the word control a couple of times, and the fact is, we are not in control. Our lives can change radically in an eye blink. It's not. Legal systems do things to us. Cars blindside us at intersections. Quit thinking you're in control. All you have a certain patina of control over your life, but you got to be light on your feet, because stuff will change tomorrow in a minute.
Yeah. Well, I said the only thing you can control is your actions, yourself, your behavior is the only thing you have control over. Yeah.
And so I think of it as collecting tools for doing that, and acknowledging that things can change. Change is the only constant. We were talking a minute ago about things changing. And it's like, you just got to get used to that idea and don't spend any more time. It's counterproductive. It's not productive. I guess that's a core value of me, is Is this of use to anybody, including you? This reaction you're about to have, you know, is it productive to wail about it? I mean, maybe it's an emotional release. Okay, maybe that's the best thing, as long as you're not clubbing baby seals or doing morally distasteful things
or
to
harming your
make
partner.
yourself
There's a
feel
way
better.
to go move that emotion that
Yeah,
needs to come out. If it needs to come out with a scream, if it needs to come out with crying, if it needs to come out with hitting something, like move that energy in a way that doesn't cause harm to you or another person. So
or
use a
anybody
damn
else.
it
Yeah, go
doll,
beat
go
on a
punch a
tree or
pillow,
something.
go punch a punching bag, go scream your life out in the garage or the bedroom or whatever. Like
Where you're
I've
not going to
literally
frighten the babies or the family. Yeah,
right, right. Go get in the car, drive away, and scream. That's one of my favorite places to do. Is I
road
need to
rage.
go.
That's
I
probably
no,
what half
I
of road
drive.
rage is.
I mean, yeah. I don't like. Don't scream at people. I go out sometimes if I'm very upset. I'm trying to regulate. There's been like a really big disagreement in my house, and I am just so
You're
dysregulated
just wound.
that
Yeah,
sitting and doing anything or trying to calm down and breathe is not what it is. It's I'm going to go
yeah,
beat my chest and scream bloody
yeah,
murder in the car.
yeah.
I've done that. I've
I
needed
get
to
it.
do that.
I get it. And so that whole
And you let it
control
out.
thing,
Yeah.
sometimes control, I guess they'd be coping mechanisms. If I get to reincarnate, I'm a Christian. I don't really believe in that, but boy, a lot of the evidence seems to point to multiple times around. It would be nice if you had multiple shots at life to become more
Yeah.
enlightened. It's like, oh, I screwed that one up. Hit the reset button. I
Yeah.
want to do that again as a
I'll try
chipmunk or
again.
whatever. Nice thought, but anyway, yeah, the more tools you get at your disposal, I think the better off you are. And I have learned and become aware on a conscious level. I don't know, more on a more intuitive level. I've been thinking my way through things for decades now, and it's like, you know what? There's stuff that is not going to go away. So figure out a healthy way to cope with it, because it's now part of my nature. There's only so much of it. Psychology, I think you can mess with, and I think I'm healing those parts that have been messed with, changed. If I saw an amygdala, I don't know what part of your brain changes under persistent long-term stress, PTSD or something like that.
Your
And
amygdala is the primary one. That's your lizard brain where fear and all of those things live.
I'm
Those
a
big,
biology
big
major. I used to
emotions.
know that. I can't get a picture of where the
Yeah.
amygdala
But
is.
it
I'll have to
changes
go
your
look.
whole brain. It changes the amount of gray matter. It changes the connections in the neurons. It changes your amygdala's response, like your fight or flight fear response. And then your amygdala goes into your vagus nerve, which regulates your nervous system and
Yeah,
how your whole body. Then we talked about somatic therapy, how then your nervous system reaches every corner of your body, and a lot of people feel it in their chest or in their gut. They get a gut feeling. They get their body, like they shake.
yeah.
um,
That's what I think of when
they need
when
to
you
go
talk
run, they
gut
need to
is
go scream, they need to go
autonomic
whatever, and that
system.
moves. You can put an ice pack on your upper chest, on your vagus nerve, and that can bring your nervous system down really quickly.
Breathing
There's
has a big effect on that.
so
Controlling your breathing.
yeah, breathing, it just depends on who you are and where you're at on that journey, and what taps into your nervous system.
Yeah.
Mine tends to be vocal. The quickest
Hmm.
release for me, which is I have to be careful with, because that
Yep.
turns
Scary.
into not taking the time out and saying words that I don't mean.
Yep. That's right.
It's like, okay, I'm going to go get in
Yeah.
my car and scream instead. But being vocal, and it's also interesting. So if anyone's trying to figure this out for themselves, how to regulate your nervous system, look at the things that naturally bring you joy. and I'm not saying if you are, so for me, singing at the top of my lungs, there is nothing that amps up my energy at any given moment of any day more than belting out my favorite songs at the top of my lungs with no one else around, just carefree singing. And
Is it
so
the belting or the song? Is it like the lyrics of the song or some association
it's
with the
both, but
song?
I can
Or is
listen
it
to
the act of
music.
singing?
I can listen to music. Music can affect your cells and the way you express, and like feeding yourself positive vibes versus like negative vibes. Music has a huge impact on us, period. The
Yeah.
vibrations, etc. And that's definitely part of it. But I can listen there. I've said this to so many people my whole life. Hearing a song and singing it or moving my body to, like, I feel this like I can't stop it urge to sing along or to
Can't
move
stop
my
the feeling.
body. And so singing, I've starting my day with, in the bathroom with the speaker on 10, belting. I have a couple of songs right now that I just start. That's how I start my day. And I just sing at the top of my lungs and just like
I
let
need a
loose.
video of this shower
And
singing.
it sets my whole day up. But looking at
Yeah.
that brings me so much joy and pleasure, and gets me going for the day, and like makes me happy and my fullest expression of myself. And so I go out and
Mm-hmm.
spread that joy and light into the world as much as
Mm-hmm.
possible. And then same when I'm dysregulated, I need the vocal release for my nervous system.
Interesting.
They mirror one
That's
another. So if you are looking at the way that you fight with your spouse, or the way that you fight with your kids, or the way that you get dysregulated and triggered and respond or react poorly,
mm-hmm.
look at what gives you energy and joy, what amps you up
Mm-hmm.
for the day, and
Learn what triggers
find
good
the
stuff.
mirror for that release when you're pissed off and dysregulated.
Yeah. Yeah. Go there. Use
It'll
your
change
mind
your
if you
life.
can and go there. Yeah.
Lewis's
Yeah.
is physical. He has a damn it doll, and he needs to go beat
A
something
damn
to
it doll.
physically
No kidding.
release that energy
Interesting.
out of
I had a
him.
pillow I used to beat when I was a kid.
And
You know,
different
the
things will
punching
be
bag.
satisfying and regulating for different people. You just have to find it, and you
Yeah.
have to not be worried about like, is this normal or is this weird, or like I look
Accept it.
psychotic right now. Like you just got to let yourself do the thing that your body needs.
I imagine
And
it's
for
like
some
a
people, it could be
veteran
sitting
coming
and
home,
breathing. It's not going
you
to be that
know.
intense.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and as you get more practice, you do get it yourself more under control, but it was very helpful to me to get that indication that not everything is to be thought through or to be
Yeah.
controlled. It's just the way it is. My leg is gone. My amygdala is beat up or whatever. And so then you have your permission not to act out, but it's like, okay, I can adjust. Now I need to go get on Google and read about amygdala stuff, PTSD stuff, and now I have something to learn, and now my brain has something to work
Well, and when
on and a new habit and improve things. There's a way forward. Where before it was just like, why can I not think myself through this?
Yeah. Well, and that's where I think a lot. So what we're talking about is somatic therapy. We're talking about an integration. So somatic is we're integrating the body and the body with the mind. So we're not just talking through things, which is also incredibly helpful. Getting to the bottom of
Psychosomatic.
things requires discussion. But when you begin to integrate body work, breathing, deep breathing, visual meditations being offered by a therapist or a book or a YouTube video or whatever that you follow, and you have do a meditation, do a specific breathing, learn how to go do guttural screams and beat the bed and move
Try
the
stuff,
energy
see
out of
what
your
works.
body.
Yeah.
Whatever you take, where it's somatosensory or
It's not psychosomatic.
psychosomatotherapy. And
Psycho's the brain.
somatic is the body. And so
Mm-hmm.
we're integrating. It's not just about thinking and white knuckling your way through something. It's about, where does this feeling or this belief or this trauma live in my body? So if it's
Where is it?
psychological
Yeah.
trauma, where does it, like, okay, it lives in my amygdala in my brain. Where is that living in my body? I've seen, for me, a lot of everything lives in my chest. So I've done a lot of work
Hmm.
around regulating and focusing on my chest, on the energy in my chest, on
Hmm.
all of this area. And then it comes up into my throat, and then it becomes vocal, and that's how I get it out.
Ah, okay.
um
Like your lungs.
it's singing,
Okay.
screaming, moving that
Mm-hmm.
energy in a physical way. Or dance, which is like my whole body, right? It lives in my whole body.
Get rid of energy.
But I don't dance when I'm angry. That's like a, not fucking dancing right
That
now.
would be a good friends routine. Yeah, that would be
But
a comedy
people find
routine.
it, it lives in my hands. Like, I just like, people make fists when they're thinking so hard about something, or
Yeah,
can't move
yeah.
something. They want to hit something, or it lives in their arms, or it lives in their stomach. Like, people will get nauseous and with anxiety when they're overthinking something, and they lose their appetite, or they throw up, or they just need to lay in bed for the day. I can't walk,
Hunker
my
over.
stomach hurts. Our
Yeah.
trauma lives. They've proven this. Trauma, psychological trauma. You've never been beaten, sexually abused. No one touched you. Your trauma is in your brain. It's in your emotions and your feelings and your thoughts. It manifests in your body. It manifests in the way that in your posture. It manifests in your eye contact. It manifests in the way that you carry your shoulders. It manifests in the way you carry your hips. It
Mm-hmm.
manifests in the way that you walk. It manifests in the way that you handle emotions, handle arguments, and it lives in the fascia of your body. It determines literally, like, the
Yeah,
shape of your body.
yeah. That's
And
where body
so
language and reading
when
people and
people,
sensing how people are comes from.
yeah, like, you can read someone's energy, and there's so much to that. You can feel someone's
Yeah.
energy when they walk in a room, and that's part of it. And so I just think of people, so many people that I know, who say talk therapy doesn't work. It doesn't work for me.
Yeah.
I don't like talking to
Yeah.
somebody about it. These are the people that I'm
Yeah.
like, maybe you need to try somatic therapy, where it's some
There's
talk,
another approach.
because you gotta be able to tell the therapist what's going on. But then there are exercises
Yeah,
the
you have to
therapist
communicate. Yeah.
can lead you through, that are physical, connecting the mind body and building that bridge, so you can find where in your body that trauma is living, and do the things that will help move it and heal it and exercise it and get it out and healed and work with it. Because our minds and our bodies are not separate. They work together, just like that
Yeah.
soup, that alchemy, that spider web, like, that we
Mhm.
always talk about. Everything is interwoven and working together, and there's connections everywhere, and finding it requires a use of all of our tools, not just
Yes.
one thing. So,
Bigger toolbox. It's do it for yourself, do it for your relationships with other adults, with kids, whether you're a parent or not. These are all good tools
yeah.
to explore and pick up.
All right, well, we are at an hour and a half, so I'm already going to have to cut some of this stuff.
Exactly.
um
Exactly. The
I
editor's job,
know.
that's the hard part.
I know.
Well, I
I
don't
hate
need that
it.
minute in that movie.
It
You'll
is.
have
I
to
have to go
release
through
the
and find, like,
director's
little
cut of
minutes to
some of
take
these.
out. And I'm like, ugh, gotta take this pause and this whatever. Like, this isn't relevant.
Yeah.
Take this out, and, like, try to
Yeah.
pare it down to an hour. But yeah. So This was a very philosophical, we're always philosophical, but there wasn't a lot of like tangible, here's how to in this episode, but I'm hoping that people are walking away with a deeper sense of, one, feeling like they aren't crazy, like this shit is hard, this shit I've been working on like feels validated. There are imperfect parents everywhere. We're all imperfect beings. We all have different ways of responding to things.
There isn't a perfect parent anywhere.
But hopefully the encouragement and keep going, like the way you nurture yourself, the choices that you make, and also empowering. I hope that this episode was empowering for you and that you're walking away with a reminder that I am in control of one thing, and that is me. I choose how to respond, how to behave, and how I'm going to navigate the world.
Mm-hmm.
Because that's it. That's all you've got. Everything else is out of your control. And there's a responsibility in that, but there's a releasing in that too.
Yeah. When we make choices, when we catch ourselves making choices we're not proud of after the fact, that's a chance to do it better next time. Don't take that as a defeat. Take that as okay, I learned something.
Yeah.
And Google it, talk to friends, figure out. Now you got a side hobby. When parents are busy, but you have a chance to self-improvement. You got a loose thread you can untangle and make the world a little bit better place in the course of pursuing that.
And if you're struggling or feeling like you want someone who's done it and guided others to do it and help along the way, someone to walk with you, that's where you call me. And
there you go.
Make comments
too, please, if you're listening. Let us know if there's a related thing we can talk about or share. Because we're all in it together. But give Jenny a call. She's pretty good.
We're ramping up the podcast side of things here. We're focusing on building the audience and building our reach and getting to as many people as we can, because you never know who's out there looking for the right resource, the right message to help them along the way. And so if you haven't yet, please please share, please subscribe, please download, please give us 5 stars. Send this to one person. And write us a review, send me an email if you want to offer a testimonial and your thoughts about, or if you have questions or a topic you really want us to talk about. Like send us your feedback and help us get this show to the masses. You got to constantly have to be beating this algorithm, so we got to play that game. So if you believe in us and want us to succeed and want this message out there, please go do those things. That's the only way it's going to get seen. So is with your support. So awesome. Thank you for being here with us, and happy parenting and good luck out there. Well, did you learn anything new? Or have you heard all of this before? Do you agree with us, disagree with us, have a question? We want to see you in our inbox or via the Patreon page in the show notes. Tap on either link to send us your feedback, share your own parenting story, or support our mission of providing a connected community for all parents. And don't forget to hit subscribe so you never miss an episode. If you loved this episode, click on that little star and give us 5 of them so we can get visible to other parents who are looking for us. This is your weekly reminder. Parents, you already have everything you need inside of you. You are a strong, loving, capable parent. And here, you are never alone. I'll see you next week.